everyone, welcome to another Random Talk Sunday, and today I thought it would be interesting to briefly address a topic that has been sort of on my mind lately, and I think is something interesting to talk about, and that deals with the concept of the media and if it sort of conveys something that is reflective onto real life, like the characters that we see on television, or the music we listen to, or the movies that we watch. Are they all reflecting some kind of existing reality that is sort of a part of who we are, sort of in this day and age? And I think in certain respects it does. And I think it does this in a variety of interesting ways. If you look at how characters and stories were done in the black and white era, you can sort of see how now characters are completely different in the way that they sort of are structured, and the stories revolve around various things that might not have been a part of something that was within the black and white era of filmmaking. And I think a perfect example could be the way men are represented. Within the 50s and earlier, even 60s, you could say as well, male characters were a lot more dominant in that they took on more leadership roles, and they were they were very sure of themselves and as to what they wanted, and they always had sort of a goal or mission to accomplish. And it's not to say that we don't see those kinds of characteristics being presented today, but I think there has been this shift in not sort of representing those kinds of characters, because now men are portrayed as being a little bit more passive, not as goal-oriented, and again, not displaying a real level of leadership. And again, that's just one example, but I think that's kind of something that I think can be noted as far as the circumstances within what people could see happening sort of within real life. The kinds of things that you see in media. For example, music. The way music was represented in today's universe is completely different from 50, 40 years ago, even 30 years ago. It was a lot, I would say it was a lot less, I think, crude. There was a lot less, there was a lot less swearing within lyrics with music within the past. Also, music was also based upon more of the talent rather than just purely on superficial grounds. And now we see that that's completely sort of flipped, considering the fact that most people who are very talented sort of showcase their wealth and their assets in a more flamboyant and over-exaggerated way than they did within the past. There was a lot more, I think, class and subtlety within eras like the 50s and 60s, but now it's you see completely just how self-absorbed a lot of these people are that are within our media, in particular with music, and you see how and wonder if that's some reflection on as to how people sort of behave now. I'm considering that a lot of people buy into what these artists are putting out there and sort of like the ego um, that they have. So again, it just goes to show that, you know, media reflects a little bit of ourselves and the time that we live in. Again, the stories may not be completely accurate as to what exactly is going on. I mean, there's obviously going to be stories like science fiction stories that have not represented in any way, shape, or form what has happened, but maybe the themes, maybe the characters, maybe something about the film sort of transcends into some kind of reality in that we see these kinds of people within real life. Um, and I think that's just something that's very important to note. And I think we do see these kinds of changes happening, all as a result of, you know, the lifestyles changing, of the people changing. But we have to ask ourselves, is change really for the better? Is it really something, is this really what we want from the media to convey about us as a culture? You know, do we want to have this kind of material showcased and consider it to be, you know, a representation of us and be somehow a high art? Or are there certain things that maybe we should discard or maybe pay less attention to? And again, I think it's all comes down to how we want to be perceived. Um, if you want to be perceived as this, then you're going to get more of that. But if there's sort of a more collective change into what things were like back in wherever time period, then those changes might happen depending on, you know, again, what real people um, end up, you know, sort of being brought out to be in this world. So again, media is going to get a hold of that. It's going to, and it probably does this completely unintentionally, but you see how it sort of reflects this reality that exists within our time, so to speak. Not completely, but you know, if you start paying attention a little more, if you start seeing the patterns, you will sort of see the kinds of things that uh, that exist within more modern media that are not reflective of was what was in the past. Now, I think media has the ability to be to express sort of a universal human. Uh, it's able to express sort of a universal human nature that again transcends over time. You know, the human race hasn't. If you look at the human race, it hasn't evolved all that much over the years. The human race has pretty much stayed the same for time and time again. No matter how we try to change things, things are going to be always the way they are. Um, and I think media does reflect this sort of universal attitude, but at the same time, it's circumstances and it's time that ultimately alters the ways in which people are sort of showcased, whether that be through music, whether that be through television, whether that be through um, movies. For example, homosexuals is another perfect example. You know, back in the day, it was very uncommon to see homosexual characters, but now it's now pretty common and fairly popular to see these kinds of characters being sort of showcased. The Imitation Game, perfect example. You know, the TV show Modern Family, you know, it has a gay couple in it. So again, we're seeing these kinds of shifts and they're all a reflection of society's attitudes, and society's um, views sort of changing. Um, and we sort of have to ask ourselves what changes are going to make it better for everybody, and what changes are maybe putting a detriment um, to us trying to achieve um, a sense of virtue or a sense of righteousness, because usually media tries to convey that, because usually you see that there's always a moral within a movie. There's usually within really popular songs, you see that there's some kind of message being conveyed. Um, at least I think more so in the past than probably nowadays. And again, you see this with television too. If you watch Breaking Bad, I think that is a very perfect example of um, these different generational interpretations, and you seeing how they ultimately are impacted by the sort of society in which they live in. That's a perfect example. Um, but again, I think these things are important, and I think what ends up happening is people think, oh, it's just media. It's just it's not real, because it's just entertainment. It's not designed to be this thing that opens us up to reality. It's supposed to make us escape from reality. Um, which again, there are things that are within media that I think are kind of over exaggerated and maybe not are not part of um, the uh, that are not really part of what we would consider the real world. But I think what people need to understand is when you really look at the characters, if you look at the stories as to what the characters are kind of going through, if you see how they react and how they act in certain scenarios, you ultimately see how that it is directly sort of speaking to the times in which we live in, to the understandings that we've adopted. Um, Again, it's supposed to, I think, bring us to that reality. Um, and that's what I find to be very fascinating about media. And that's what I think we need to understand is do we want to live in a society that is, you know, sort of bringing out this reality? Do we want to, have things the way that they are? Does anything, uh, do you think that there's something that we should focus on? And sometimes even media kind of warns us. For example, within books like 1984, George Orwell. There's all these different kinds of media that I think are trying to convey um, some kind of reality. They're not, again, they're not completely reality, but they focus on trying to, you know, maybe pull back the curtains of what maybe we initially weren't able to see was real, and give us a real picture that maybe we weren't able to see before. And I think that's what I find so fascinating about media. But I think that's another point too, is that the media is designed to give its audience what it wants, and largely what an audience wants is what's popular, or what's good, or what's acceptable for the time. And again, this is what the media ultimately ends up providing. And that's the thing, we need to ask ourselves, is this really something that we want? Is this something that is moral? Is this something that's good? Is this something that is bringing out something is it bringing out some kind of truth into which that maybe we should focus more on, and maybe also maybe try to focus on making better? I mean, that's, I think, a very important distinction to make, and understand. And I think if we look more into what is being showcased to us, the more we can understand on, what problems we're having, and, what we're not seeing, what we're ignoring, what we're not appreciating, you know. It's all showcased based upon, just even commercials do this, to a certain extent sometimes. I mean, they kind of convey some sort of reality. Um, and I think it's important that we take this all into account and ask ourselves, is really the 21st century as good as it was in the 20th century? Is it really, are there things that maybe we need to work on? Are there things that are maybe in the past that we can actually learn from, and we're probably a little bit more maybe moral or just? I think that's what we really need to ask ourselves, and explore that idea of what it means to be human. And I think that's what media often does. It does approach it on that level, and I think it kind of brings out this reality, and this showcasing of the time period. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say when it comes to this topic. I think it's very interesting. I think if you start reading into it more this way, you'll kind of see where I'm coming from. And again, I think that's what media is designed to do. But I think as an audience, we have to look and see if this is the way we want things to be, and if we really want to, are these characters good characters are they really good role models? Are they really doing something that's beneficial, or are they, just a caricature of the times, and maybe aren't doing things that ultimately maybe benefit or make our society a better place? I mean, we have to ask all of these questions, I think. And I think largely a lot of that can be found with what's on television today, um, what's in movies today, what's in music today, what's in books today. You can all just look and see this reality trying to come out to people, and either maybe warn them, encourage them, but it's saying a lot of things, and it's asking a lot of questions, and we kind of, as I think as a sort of a society, need to look at it and go, is this really the way we should be living? Or is this the way that things should be? So I think that's a very interesting thing to look at, and I think the media does provide that outlet for people, and I don't think people usually read in it too much. I think that's because we're just so visual, and we don't take, again, the meaning behind it, um, which is largely through the dialogue as well as through how characters react in certain situations. Um, Again, if we really look at it deeply, I think we can really get a sense of what kind of things it's saying about our reality and the time in which we live in. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say. But again, if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you on the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.